Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard, where we set out to remember and celebrate the lives of those who lived to entertain us by visiting their final resting places. Today we head back to Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale to visit such stars as William Boyd, Alla Nazimova, James Arness, and many more. Join us, won't you? Forest Lawn Glendale, a cemetery whose fame matches many of the stars buried here. We visited this stunning cemetery a year ago, but came nowhere close to seeing all there is to see here, not just in terms of famous graves, but art, architecture, and gorgeous vistas. There's enough here to fill a library. And so we're back again, to visit some stars we missed the first time around, and enjoy some more of the beautiful splendor that is Forest Lawn. In fact, there's still so much to see. Even our revisit will be broken up into 2 parts. Today we once again explore the hallowed halls of the Great Mausoleum, a concrete and marble Gothic cathedral for the dead, inspired by Camposanto in Genoa, Italy, and built to last 1,000 years. Construction of the Great Mausoleum began in 1917 with the Azalea Terrace, and proceeded in alphabetical order from there. The terrace is all named for flowers: begonia, coleus, dahlia, evergreen, fuchsia, gardenia, holly, iris, and jasmine. And the centerpiece, the crown jewel, is the Memorial Terrace, completed in 1931. In these halls we are surrounded by, to quote Forest Lawn founder Hubert Eaton, noble architecture with interiors full of light and color, and redolent of the world's best history and romances. He goes on, Forest Lawn shall become a place where lovers new and old shall love to stroll and watch the sunset glow, planning for the future or reminiscing on the past. Today we shall revel in the reminiscence of the past. If you haven't done so already, be sure to check out our original 3-part tour of Forest Lawn Glendale. We'll begin our tour just in from the entrance on the right, in the Whispering Pines section. Oh boy, you remember this hill? I'm not as young as I was a year ago. Let's use Hollywood magic to get up the hill this time. And here we are at the grave of John Gilbert. He was one of the silent era's great lovers, a debonair leading man of films such as The Merry Widow, The Big Parade, and His Hour. At the height of his career, his popularity rivaled that of Rudolf Valentino. He also starred alongside Greta Garbo in a number of films, their on-screen chemistry spilling off-screen in a much-publicized love affair. They had planned to marry, but Garbo famously jilted him at the altar. Like so many, Gilbert's career began to wane when the talkies came around. Depression and alcoholism began to take their toll on his health, and in 1936, he suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 36. Let's continue in toward the mausoleum and stop at the fork in the road. On the right is still the Whispering Pines section. In from the road several rows, around where the graves change direction, we find Madame Alla Nazimova, the exotic Russian-born actress of the silent era, known as much for her flamboyant lifestyle as for her performances. The stage made her a star. She made her silent film debut in the 1916 filmed version of the play War Brides. Hollywood success quickly followed, in films like Revelation, Camille, and Salome. Nazimova wielded considerable power among women in Hollywood in the late teens, early 20s, and as perhaps one of Hollywood's first known lesbian actresses, was involved romantically with a number of them. Nazimova is believed to have coined the phrase sewing circle, referring to lesbian and bisexual actresses of the day who were forced to conceal their true sexuality. Toward the tree several spaces is the grave of composer and songwriter Frank Churchill. He's best known today for his work for Disney, writing songs and score for a number of silly symphonies and animated features. His song Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, written for the Three Little Pigs in 1933, actually became a huge commercial hit.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Big bad wolf, big bad wolf. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf?
He wrote songs for Disney's first feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Iconic songs like Hi-Ho and Whistle While You Work.
Just whistle while you work.
Other films include Bambi and Dumbo. He was nominated for an Oscar for the song Baby Mine from Dumbo. And Love is a Song from Bambi.
Love is a song that never ends.
He won the Oscar for Best Score for Dumbo. Churchill suffered from depression and, in 1942, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound while sitting at his piano. He was 40. Let's make our way now to the Great Mausoleum. As mentioned in our previous tour, many of the sections of the Great Mausoleum can only be reached by those who have access to these private areas. We'll begin in the publicly accessible area, the Memorial Terrace. Just in from the entrance on the left is the Memorial Terrace Columbarium, where we find the niche and colorful urn of Bobby Womack. He was a singer who, along with his brothers, made up the 60s R&B group The Valentinos, whose hits include Lookin' for a Love. The group was discovered by Sam Cooke, who would help launch their careers. After the Valentinos, Bobby went on to have a successful solo career. He was also a prolific songwriter, penning a number of hits, including the Rolling Stones' first UK hit, It's All Over Now. In 2009, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Further in on the right is the Sanctuary of Benediction, where Sid Grauman is entombed. Also here is another theater mogul, Alexander Pantages. If you've ever seen a Broadway play in Hollywood, there's a good chance you saw it at the Pantages Theater. Pantages was a vaudeville impresario who created a powerful circuit of theaters across the US and Canada, promoting the movie palace concept that became popular in early Hollywood. The Hollywood Pantages Theater, which opened in 1930, was the last one he built. Over the years, it has exhibited not only Broadway shows, but film premieres and even the Academy Awards. The next corridor down is the Columbarium of Memory. Right by the entrance, on the right, is the niche of Ellen Corby. She was an actress, perhaps best remembered for her role as Grandma on The Waltons, a role which earned her 3 Emmy Awards. She can also be seen in films like Vertigo and I Remember Mama, which earned her an Oscar nomination. At the end of this corridor, beneath the memory window, is the niche of Rex Ingram. He was considered one of the great directors of the silent era, known for ambitious and often surreal films with a dash of macabre fantasy. His films include The Magician, The Prisoner of Zenda, and The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the film which turned an unknown Rudolf Valentino into a star. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 58. The Memorial Court of Honor. Here we are again at the magnificent Last Supper window. Beneath the window is a row of crypts that money can't buy. For those, the Forest Lawn Council of Regents has deemed immortals, individuals who have contributed a service to humanity. Let's find out who these immortals are. Glenn Dumke, an educator who served as chancellor of the California State University system for 20 years. Rudolf Friml, a composer and concert pianist. His works include Rosemarie and The Vagabond King. Hubert Eaton, the man himself, builder of Forest Lawn. His actual crypt is to the right, across the Court of Honor. Eaton became president of Forest Lawn in 1917, the realization of his belief that death was not an end, but a new beginning, and that cemeteries should be a place as well for the living, filled with the beauty of art and nature. Rufus von Kleinsmid, an educator and president of my alma mater, USC. Fight on. Jan Styka, a Polish painter of Christian and historical art. One of his massive panoramas, The Crucifixion, is here at Forest Lawn in the Hall of the Crucifixion and Resurrection, a building constructed specifically to house this massive painting. It's 195 feet long and 45 feet high. After his death in 1925, Styka was originally buried in Rome. Decades later, Eaton arranged to have his remains relocated here. Robert Andrews Millikan, a scientist and educator who won the Nobel Prize for his work to help us understand the nature of light, atoms, and electrons. Carrie Jacobs Bond, an early 20th century songwriter. Her biggest hit was I Love You Truly, making her the first woman to sell 1 million copies of a song. Other hits include A Perfect Day. And Gutzon Borglum, a sculptor known for his large-scale sculptures, most notably Mount Rushmore. The sculpture, hewn from the Black Hills of South Dakota, features 60-foot carvings of 4 presidents: Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. One last little intriguing nugget: at the Last Supper window dedication, Forest Lawn sealed items in a time capsule, to be opened in the year 3000. Here we are now in the Evergreen Terrace. On the stairway landing between the Evergreen and Fuchsia terraces, we find the sarcophagus of comedian Joe Penner. While not as well remembered today as some of his contemporaries, in the 30s Penner was a top-tier entertainer. His light and zany foolishness was panacea for a nation suffering under the Great Depression. His biggest success was on the radio, voted radio's top comedian in 1934. He was famous for his catchphrase, "Wanna buy a duck?" So popular was this shtick that even Disney parodied it in Mother Goose Goes to Hollywood.
My bowl, my bowl. Oh, yes, of course. Yes, my bowl.
You wanna buy a duck?
You wanna buy a duck? Woo!
He can also be seen in a handful of films, like New Faces of 1937. His career was cut far too short when he died of heart failure at just 36. He rests beneath the beautiful children's window here in the Great Mausoleum. We've now arrived at the Fuchsia Terrace. Many of the stars we'll visit from here on out we paid tribute to from afar in part 2 of our original tour. But today we'll see if we can't get up close and personal. If so, we'll revisit them briefly. But for more on these individuals, be sure to check out part 2. This archway between the 2 main buildings is the Columbarium of the Dawn. Here we find the niche of Ed Wynn, fondly remembered today for lending his distinctive voice to characters like the Mad Hatter in Disney's Alice in Wonderland, and playing Uncle Albert in Mary Poppins.
How nice! I was hoping you'd turn up. We all would have such a jolly time. We love to laugh, loud and long and clear.
His career spanned generations, from vaudeville to radio, film, and television. He was the toy maker in Babes in Toyland, and earned an Oscar nomination for his role in The Diary of Anne Frank. Also here is Ed's son, Keenan Wynn, who is also a prolific character actor. Keenan can be seen in hundreds of film and TV roles, including Song of the Thin Man and Annie Get Your Gun. Further in is the Columbarium of the Nativity, where we find Hollywood's favorite misanthrope, W.C. Fields. A comedian of legendary status today, his career began humbly as a juggler on vaudeville. He then made his way to Broadway and film, becoming known for roles as scoundrels and henpecked men, but always with an intelligent wit behind them.
Hi, good morning. I have an engagement for a story conference.
You big hotty-dotty. You smoke vile cigars all day and drink whiskey half the night. Someday you'll drown in a vat of whiskey.
Drown in a vat of whiskey. Death, where is thy sting?
Fields wished to be cremated after his death, but his family resisted on religious grounds. It wasn't until 2 years after his death that he was finally cremated and inurned here. On the wall opposite of Fields is the niche of Henry Travers. He was an actor best remembered for playing Clarence, the lovable guardian angel to Jimmy Stewart's George Bailey, on the perennial Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life.
Why'd you want to save me?
That's what I was sent down for. I'm your guardian angel.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
Ridiculous of you to think of killing yourself for money. $8,000.
Yeah, now just things like that. Now, how do you know that?
I told you I'm your guardian angel. I know everything about you.
Well, you look about like the kind of an angel I'd get.
Other films include Mrs. Miniver, which earned him an Oscar nomination. We've now arrived at the elusive Hawley Terrace, which, next to the Memorial Terrace, most closely resembles a Gothic cathedral, with its magnificent soaring arches, dim lighting, hanging lamps, and stained glass windows. Its majesty reserved, for the most part, for the dead. As we make our way through the quiet halls of the Hawley Terrace, we would be remiss if we didn't stop and pay our respects to one of the 20th century's greatest and most beloved musical performers. Resting here at the end of the Sanctuary of Ascension, the King of Pop, Michael Jackson, his sarcophagus painted in colorful light from the Ascension windows. He's a man who needs no introduction and will not soon be forgotten. Michael rose to prominence on the music scene with his brothers in the highly successful pop soul group, the Jackson 5, in the 60s and 70s. With his popularity on the rise, he branched out on his own to pursue a solo career. By the 80s, Michael was a dominant force in music, becoming one of the best-selling, most awarded artists in history. His hits include Beat It, Billie Jean, Bad, Man in the Mirror, Black or White, and my favorite of his songs, Thriller, which just happened to play on the radio the day I visited Michael. I figured that was his way of saying hello. His 1982 album, Thriller, is the best-selling album of all time. And the music video for Thriller was revolutionary, produced as a short horror film, directed by John Landis, and narrated by the legendary Vincent Price.
So let me hold you tight and share up together.
As he was preparing for his comeback tour in 2009, This Is It, Michael found it difficult to sleep. His physician began administering dangerous levels of propofol, which eventually led to cardiac arrest and Michael's untimely death. He was just 50. Michael was inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as well as the Songwriters Hall of Fame. A rare talent, gone too soon. Before we move on, let's make sure Michael has some flowers. On behalf of millions the world over, Michael, thank you for the music. You are missed. At the end of the corridor of reverence is this distinguished sarcophagus, a recreation of Donatello's St. George. This is the final resting place of philanthropist Howard Ahmanson, who donated to cultural and educational causes in Los Angeles. He's the namesake of downtown's Ahmanson Theater, part of the Los Angeles Music Center. We've now arrived at the corridor of the Madonna. On the left is the Sanctuary of Twilight, where we find renowned jazz musician and band leader, Isham Jones. In the 20s and 30s, Jones's band was one of the most popular dance bands in the country. He was also a songwriter. Some of his biggest hits include I'll See You in My Dreams, as alluded to here on his epitaph, and It Had to Be You, a #1 hit for 5 weeks straight in 1924.
It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and finally found the somebody who could make me be true.
Further down the corridor of the Madonna, also on the left, is the Sanctuary of Golden Slumber, where we find one of the most visited sites in the mausoleum, the crypt of renowned yogi and spiritual guru, Paramahansa Yogananda. Born in India, Yogananda would introduce the West to the powers of meditation and yoga. In 1920, he founded the spiritual organization Self-Realization Fellowship. His book, Autobiography of a Yogi, is considered one of the seminal spiritual guides of the 20th century, and influenced many great men to follow, from George Harrison to Steve Jobs. After his death at the age of 59, Forest Lawn funeral director claimed his body lay in a state of perfect preservation for 20 days, with no signs of decay before entombment. His body had been embalmed, though. A documentary was made about the life of Yogananda, titled Awake, The Life of Yogananda. Next along this corridor is the Sanctuary of Eternal Prayer. Here we find one of the fathers of film music, Alfred Newman. A musical child prodigy, Newman arrived in Hollywood in the 30s, where he soon found himself writing music for 20th Century Fox. One of his most recognized pieces, reminiscent of a New York street scene, was used in several films, including the opening of How to Marry a Millionaire. We even got a glimpse of him conducting. Newman was music director for 20 years at 20th Century Fox, scoring films like All About Eve and How the West Was Won. He won 9 Oscars and was nominated a whopping 45 times, surpassed only by John Williams for number of nominations for a composer. Today though, his most recognized piece of music is probably the 20th Century Fox Fanfare, composed in 1933. It plays just about any time you see a movie from 20th Century Fox. Alfred Newman was the head of a dynasty of composers in Hollywood. His brothers Emil and Lionel were also music directors and composers. Alfred's son, Thomas, has composed scores for films like American Beauty, WALL-E, and Skyfall. His son David wrote music for films like The Nutty Professor and Anastasia, and his daughter Maria is a classical composer. His nephew is Randy Newman, who has written music for films like The Natural and Pixar films including Monsters, Inc., Cars, and Toy Story. It was Randy who wrote and performed the song that would become the theme of Pixar, You've Got a Friend in Me. The last corridor on the left is the Sanctuary of Sacred Promise. Here we find the crypt of William Boyd. He's best known for his portrayal of cowboy hero Hopalong Cassidy. His career began in the silent era, starring in a number of Cecil B. DeMille films. In 1935, Boyd won the role of Hopalong Cassidy, a role that would define his career for the rest of his life.
Give me a tumbler of straight whiskey.
You must have a cast iron stomach.
Yes, how? Folks that get careless with guns ain't got no right carrying them.
He starred in over 60 films as Hopalong Cassidy, and in the 50s, Hoppy made his way to television, making him television's first Western hero. Boyd would go on to bring Hoppy to rodeos, circuses, and parades across the country, as well as branching out into radio and comic books. He truly was a brand unto himself. Also entombed here is Boyd's wife, Grace Bradley. She appeared in a number of comedy and musical films in the 30s and 40s, often as a fun party girl. Bill and Grace met and married in 1937. As her career slowed, she eventually retired from acting to support her husband's career full-time. At the very end of the corridor of the Madonna is the Sanctuary of Holy Spirit, where Hermione Gingold is entombed. She was an English actress, known for her deep voice and sharp tongue. Her forte was stage performance, particularly in revues. On screen, she can be seen in films like The Music Man, Around the World in 80 Days, and Gigi, which earned her a Golden Globe. Looks like Miss Gingold is missing the letter D. Let's help her out. There we go. Back one corridor is the Sanctuary of Enduring Honor. Here is another man considered one of the fathers of film music, Max Steiner. He innovated how music was put to film in the early days of Hollywood, and is responsible for hundreds of classic film scores from The Treasure of the Sierra Madre to Casablanca. Perhaps his best-known score, with one of the most iconic themes in movie history, is Gone with the Wind. was nominated for an Oscar 24 times, winning 3. We head one floor down to find the golden halls of the Corridor of Glory. Here is legendary cartoonist Joe Barbera. He is the Barbera of animation studio Hanna-Barbera. Alongside the likes of Disney and Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera is responsible for some of the most beloved cartoons in history. Barbera met William Hanna at MGM, where they began collaborating. They developed a cat and mouse concept that would become their first hit, Tom and Jerry, in the 1940s. They made 114 Tom and Jerry shorts, which won them 7 Oscars. Their success led them to television, where they created and produced Rough and Ready, Huckleberry Hound, and Quick Draw McGraw. And then came the Flintstones in the 1960s.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family.
The Flintstones became the first animated primetime show to be a hit, and was the most successful animation franchise until another would come along to dethrone it, The Simpsons. Other iconic Hanna-Barbera shows and characters include The Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, and Yogi Bear. Around the corner from Barbera is the Sanctuary of Guiding Love, where we find Jetta Goudal. She was a Dutch-born actress who found her greatest success in the silent era. Another star who, perhaps not as well remembered today, was a sensation in her day, known for her exotic allure. She caught the eye of Cecil B. DeMille, who cast her in a number of roles, including The Coming of Amos and The Road to Yesterday. But she was reportedly very difficult to work with, so much so that DeMille terminated her contract. In response, she sued him, a move unheard of at the time. She was one of the earliest actors in Hollywood to stand up to the bigwigs and fight for actors' rights, actually winning the suit and setting a precedent for actors' equality. But this made her a pariah in Hollywood, where the studio system still reigned, and roles became harder to come by. After her forced retirement from acting, she worked as an interior designer. Finally, we head to the newest section of the mausoleum, the Jasmine Terrace, to find James Arness, another of Hollywood's legendary cowboy heroes. He's best remembered for his role as Marshal Matt Dillon on the TV series Gunsmoke.
Gunsmoke, starring James Arness as Matt Dillon.
Gunsmoke ran for 20 seasons on TV, making it the longest-running prime-time scripted TV series until another would come along to dethrone it, The Simpsons. Arness starred in another Western series, How the West Was Won. He's considered one of the all-time great TV stars. That's as far as we'll get in the mausoleum today. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Check out this replica 15th century suit of armor. I think we may have just found the original model for the Oscar statue.